it's just you gotta like the biggest thing I would tell people who suffer from DPDR is just you gotta give yourself a fighting chance. You gotta, you gotta don't lose hope because everything does get better. I promise you that. Like if you know where from where I was to where I am now, things are just way better, way better. And at the end of the week, I think I just thought about it. I was like, holy cow. I went the entire week without thinking about this, and it felt so relieving. It was the best fit. Like it's almost like you ever like see like a window that's all fogged up, and then you like take a washcloth and you wipe it over, and it's all clear again. That is how I felt.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm chatting to Ethan Sargent from Bradford in Ontario in Canada. Ethan's going to be telling us about his experience with and recovery from depersonalization disorder. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ethan. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Sean. How are you doing?
Good, good. I'm not too bad at all. Not too bad. So Ethan, you're 21 years old, if I'm correct,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So right now I work full time. I'm obsessed with sports. I love basketball, love football. I all throughout high school I used to play sports, everything from I played rugby, I played football, I played a little bit of soccer too. I'm very interested in geography and history. I'm a very outgoing person, I find, and I like to treat people with respect. So
Good, good, great to hear. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your experience with depersonalization and how did it
yeah.
come about? What triggered it?
So it was around I think it was 18 or my 18th or 19th birthday. In Canada, we do have legalized marijuana now, or recreational marijuana. So for my, I think it was, I can't remember, it was my 18th or 19th birthday, but long story short, I smoked a little bit of weed, and I think either it was I smoked too much or I smoked maybe the wrong strain. I don't know what happened, but long story short, I fell into a panic attack, and it was absolutely the most scariest moment of my life. It was, high heart rate, pounding heart, not knowing really where I was, and then eventually I calmed down. But then it was about, I'd say, a week or two later, I found myself having another panic attack from thinking about the panic attack I had from the marijuana. So I ended up going to the hospital, getting checked out, everything, EKG on the heart. I had my lungs checked, everything was checked. And of course, at the time I was like 18, 19. I'm healthy as could be. Um, so after that day, I got back in the hospital. A week went by. And next time I found it almost like it was hard to like focus on a task. Like I'd be sitting at my computer watching YouTube and I'd be like, ugh, like it's as if there was a pane of glass put in between my eyes and my brain. And it's almost like I couldn't focus very well. I had this feeling of like a rubber band around my neck, or not around my neck, sorry, around my forehead. Sometimes I felt like I was having trouble breathing per se, because again, I was panicking because I was like, what's going on? Um, Sometimes I thought I had vision problems because it was like almost as if things were appearing to they appeared very bright to me and really like whoa, like as if the world felt bigger and it was moving faster. um so yeah, and it was definitely a very scary time, but things did get better.
Um, it's such a common experience, Ethan, what you're describing. And it was
Yeah.
also my experience as well. It was what triggered it for me was a very very bad weed experience. It's something that with the legalization of weed, like, and kind of all
Hmm.
the kind of the positivity that comes with it. It's great. Like there's a lot to be said for just being aware of just how frightening a bad weed experience is. Like
Yeah.
when it goes on for hours and you're like,
Yeah. It was like
yeah,
because it was just like crazy because I didn't think like I heard people in the past say, "Oh, I greened up from marijuana," and they would play it as more like a joke, and I'm thinking like, "Oh, okay, that's nothing then." For me, it was like a whole new thing. It was like so scary. It was like hard. I really thought I was going to die that day. I was so afraid, so scared. But then, like I said, I I actually ended up calling a friend up that at the time and said, "Hey man, I'm freaking out." He's like, "Oh, you're just greening out, bud. You're good." But of course, I didn't see it that way at the time. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's I always found as well, like kind of subsequently, if it ever happened, as bad as it would be, I would kind of always have the thing of like, okay, this has happened before. Like however bad it seems now, in a few hours' time, it'll be like nothing happened, and you'll be okay, you know.
yeah,
But it's like the first time it happens, especially the first time it happens, and typically it happens when people are quite young, like um it really feels like you are like, well, this is it. Like I'm either going to
yeah.
die or I'm going to go crazy. I'm
That
never
was
going to come back from this, like,
that was yeah. For me, that was a lot of like the first thing that went through my mind was I was gonna have a heart attack. But then I didn't know this, but apparently no one's ever actually died from marijuana, so that was definitely a little relieving. So,
yeah, right.
um,
But when it's happening to you, you're like, well, I'm going to be the first, like,
yeah, exactly. That was
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because the heartbeat increases and you focus on that
Yeah,
and you just think
it
like,
was. That's exactly what that was for me. I was just sitting there on like I was sitting on the couch. I was watching it was I forget what movie it was. Maybe no, well, maybe it was Game of Thrones. I can't remember.
hmm,
I was sitting down in the rec room watching Game of Thrones or something like that, and then I was eating brownies at the time too. And then all of a sudden, like that, I just shot up from the couch, freaking out, heart rate, and then of course that's yeah. It just led into one thing led to another, and yeah, I calmed down eventually, but still, at the time, it felt like hours.
yeah, yeah. And also, as with any kind of bad drug experience, is like
Yeah,
the only way out is through. You do just kind of have to sit with
yeah,
it and
just
try
relax. Yeah,
just yeah, relax. And also, like when your friend said like, oh, you're just greening out, like it'll be fine. And the thing is like that they're correct, but when you're going through it first, like you're like, oh,
yeah,
that can't be right. um
yeah,
but then obviously what can happen sometimes is that like the feeling of panic triggers the feeling of disconnection, of depersonalization, which we can then focus on separately as being, or we can focus on and catastrophize it as a separate problem, which can turn into an ongoing
yeah,
an ongoing
yeah.
problem. But it was after your first experience, Ethan, with the it was subsequent to that another panic attack happened, is this?
Yeah, it was because I think I was at the time I was working night shift, and I think I was
Mm.
went to go lay down to go to sleep. And like I said, it was maybe like a week or two later, and then I was sitting in my bed, and all of a sudden, like it's the same thing. The heart rate went up because I think I was actually thinking about the weed panic attack
Yeah.
that brought on that panic attack, which I thought was kind of weird, but I ended up freaking out, and then eventually led to me going to the hospital. And of course, I got checked out, and then I was shocked when they said you're having a panic attack. Because in my mind, I'm having like a heart attack. I'm going schizophrenic. I'm having bipolar disorder. Everything you name it, I had it. Just like what you said in one of your videos. You name it, I had it. That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I remember when, I don't know if this was your experience as well, Ethan, but I mean, I remember when like a doctor or anyone told me back then, like this is anxiety. I was like, no, no,
Oh yeah,
this has to be bigger than anxiety. Like I'm you're not seeing something that's happening with me, because I know what
yeah,
anxiety is. This isn't anxiety. Um, yeah, which felt like quite a frustrating experience. I mean, subsequently you look back and you're like, okay, it actually was anxiety, but initially it feels like that can't be a correct diagnosis.
yeah. I remember I went to a so yeah, I went to the doc when I went to the hospital. They told me it was anxiety, and they
Mm,
prescribed me um, medication to,
mm,
but more like as a safety net. Like, okay, if things get really bad, take it. Because I'm not one person that I don't like to take medications, just because I want to fight things head on. But after that, I did go see a therapist and a psychiatrist, and I explained to them how I felt. Because after that panic attack is when I started developing the DPDR symptoms and all that. I told them like, hey, there's a pain. Like, I feel like I'm not real. I feel like my vision's messed up a little bit. I feel like I'm not, there's like a band on it. And I was explaining all of them, and they said exactly what probably everyone else's therapist said. Oh, that sounds like anxiety, or maybe you have depression, or stuff like that. Start exercising more, and then you'll be fine. At the time, that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to go there, them give me something to make me feel better like that. But that wasn't the
Yeah.
case because, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. And also I would have had a similar experience as well, Ethan, that like after the first bad weed experience with me, it was actually like a couple of weeks later when I had the panic attack that actually set
hmm
things off for me. Even though I later realized that when I was on the weed the first time, that was also a panic attack. But the scariest part about the panic attack a couple of weeks later was that I felt like I was back in that weed headspace or that drug headspace,
yeah, that's
even
yeah,
though I hadn't taken anything. Yeah, yeah, uh,
same thing for me. It was definitely a very frightening feeling for sure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Racing thoughts,
Yeah,
catastrophizing, that feeling of kind of disconnection, especially,
yeah.
yeah,
It
yeah,
felt I felt disconnected from not only myself but reality itself. And of course, I'm thinking I'm having. I thought I had psychosis.
mm,
That was the two biggest ones I thought I had were schizophrenia and psychosis, which I didn't have that at all. I was just you're just constantly you're thinking the worst possible thing because you're in a state of panic, I find. So of course you're not going to think, you don't think logically when you're having anxiety. You never do. Like when you're having an anxiety attack, you're always thinking the worst possible thing, which I had to try to. I ended up learning how to fight that through cognitive behavioral therapy, but and exposure therapy, and then watching your DP using your manual. So
that's it's a really really good point you make as well, Ethan, about not being able to kind of judge what's going on from a practical point of view because the most frustrating thing about anxiety is that we experience it through the filter of anxiety. So like
yeah,
for example, like so you're if you're having an intense time on weed or a panic attack or something, your heart
yeah.
starts beating a bit more quickly, which is perfectly normal. It's perfectly natural, especially like if you're like in your late teens, early 20s. Like it just
Oh yeah,
means that you're a bit nervous. But of course, anxiety laser focuses on that and says you're having a heart attack and you're going to die. And
literally,
that's and then
literally.
that turns into its own little feedback loop, and you start freaking out.
Yep,
You end up going to hospital.
yeah,
But it's that kind of feedback loop that becomes quite central to a lot of these kind of anxiety-based conditions. Um, uh,
yeah.
in that time as well, Ethan, what were in your own experience, what were the symptoms that would have been the strongest kind of day to day?
Strongest. So
Mm,
for me, it was easily like a rubber band around my forehead. Almost like vertigo, dizziness, sort of. Like when I go into
yeah.
places, I feel as if like it's like you took two 20-pound dumbbells and threw them on my head, and then I was like doing this a lot, but I wasn't actually dizzy. No matter because I would drink water, I would eat food, no matter I would exercise, no matter what I did, I somehow. But it wasn't all the time though. It was only when I was sometimes in a public setting that I would feel the dizziness. If I was at home like this, I would not feel that at all. Um, Another one would be like the pane of glass that was stuck. It was almost like they slid it in between my eyes and brain kind of feeling. And then like almost as if my head was in a fishbowl. Like like as if like and like sometimes my vision was weird. Keep in mind I wear glass I usually have glasses or contacts in. So of course I'm thinking my glasses or contacts are the problem, but that wasn't the case. Sometimes like bright lights kind of bugged me a little bit for some reason. So the strongest symptom for me was like the dizziness and like the rubber band around my head.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would have absolutely experienced the visual stuff as well. I because I wear contacts as well, contacts and glasses.
Mhm.
And I was absolutely certain that something had happened with my vision, something was wrong with the contacts, was wrong with the glasses. I went into an optometrist and I got a battery of tests done. There was nothing wrong whatsoever. Um, the rubber band around the forehead thing as well. This would be um, tension headaches.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah, yeah. And what I had something similar as well, Ethan. In this, I had in the first couple of weeks and months of having anxiety and DPDR, I had a I got really bad pain in my neck and my shoulders. It was bad. Like I had to get kind of like, massages and everything. It was tough.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was freaking out, thinking I've got some sort of like spinal disease. Like I've got
Oh
some sort of
yeah.
like I've got
Yeah.
cancer or something in the back of my neck or something horrendous thing. What was happening was anxiety causes muscle tension, and my back
Yep.
and my neck were tense. That's what was
Yeah.
happening. But again, it's like looking at that experience through the filter of anxiety, getting rid of the
Yeah.
obvious explanation and just saying, "Oh no, it's you've got some horrible muscle wasting disease."
Yeah. I remember like
Yeah.
having like you had the shoulder pain. I had the chest pain because I felt like I was always like this. Like I was always like tensed out. I was on edge most, not all the time, but most of the time. So I definitely had neck pain and chest pain. And of course I did get the chest pain checked out because, that's what anxiety sufferers like to do. We like to make sure everything's all good. I was totally
Mm.
healthy, everything. I mean, at the time I was like 18, 19 years old. So how could an 18, 19-year-old have like any heart problems?
Yeah.
Especially from all the exercising, and I never smoked at all. Like I smoked weed a few times in high school, but I never smoked cigarettes. I stayed away from major drugs. So, you know, it was impossible
Mm.
for me to get that basically.
What was it like in terms of dealing with kind of going about your daily life, Ethan, in terms of like dealing with like family and friends and things? Like, did
Um,
people know about it? Did you talk about it to them or?
so I told my parents know about it, and they were at first they were kind of confused, of course, because when you're explaining to them you don't feel real, they get kind of confused. I mean, my mother was very supportive of me. She always was messaging me, gave me positive encouragement, helped me when I needed it the most. My stepdad, he helped me out a little bit too. My siblings, of course, I didn't talk to them too much about it because, of course, like, they have their own lives, they're busy, but I did tell my parents, and they, again, the supportive, helped me with getting therapists and helped me with getting the support I needed. I only told one of my friends, and he was very supportive because he dealt with anxiety himself, and he totally knew where I was getting at. And then going throughout my daily life, it was honestly at first it was definitely a very big struggle. It was um because like you wake up and you don't feel real, so you'll be like making your bed and getting dressed in the morning, and then if I found myself focusing on the feeling of DPDR, I would have a panic attack. It was like almost as if my heart dropped in my stomach, and I'm like, oh God, what's going on? And then simple like going to work was the worst because I worked at a grocery store that was 24 hours. And during the nighttime, we had a couple interesting people come in. So it was a little bit scary because I felt like I don't feel real. And then I got to deal with people who also don't feel real, but they're on like real hard drugs. So,
Right. Right.
but yeah, it was going throughout daily life was definitely pretty, pretty difficult at first.
That thing you mentioned as well, Ethan, like, waking up and not feeling real was like such a such a it's such a common thing, but it was very much part of my experience. Was like I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have a couple of seconds of not thinking about it, and then I would remember that I have this thing, and then I would just say, and what I would say to myself would be like, is it basically I wake up and say, is it still there? And if it was still there, which every morning it was, it would just make the day feel impossible, and I would just like try to drag myself out of
Yeah.
bed, or I'd lie in bed for half an hour just thinking, oh my god, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get
Yep.
through this? And it really kind of, and also I know if this was your experience as well, Ethan, but like for me, mornings were always tougher.
Yeah.
Not nighttime felt a bit easier. I think maybe because it was, in the nighttime, there's kind of less like kind of visual stimulation. The
Yeah.
brightness isn't kind of affecting your eyes so much because your pupils are dilated. But with you working in the grocery store, it might have been different. I mean, because especially for me as well, and for a lot of people um, uh, uh, going into shops and kind of shopping malls and stuff can be difficult because the lighting is quite flat and fluorescent.
Oh yeah,
Um,
it was crazy. Yeah, for me, like I found it difficult at nighttime personally. That made a being because of the sleep schedule I was on at the time or something like that. But it was um nighttime, like you're sitting, because I was sitting in my bed alone with my own thoughts, and
Mm.
it was like every night it was just I was just overthinking and thinking and thinking. It's like my whole life, I threw everything aside, everything I loved, everything I liked was all focused now on DPDR. Like it's like I literally, I honestly, after my few months to a year of suffering from it, I basically walked out with a degree on DPDR. So I essentially like know everything. I know everything about it. I could write a PowerPoint presentation on it. I could write a book about. Like it's like it consumed my life. But then I thought to myself one day, what's the point of this? This is a waste of time. This is a natural. It's your body's natural defense mechanism. Because I know for a fact that before I had DPDR, I have experienced DPDR before. Like kind of like something happens where you're like, oh, whoa, I'm nervous right now. But you feel kind of dreamy, but like it just fades away naturally because you don't focus on it. You just go off. You go through your regular day. But I guess after the panic attack, um, I took it to heart basically and focused on it and obsessed about it and became like it was like something that became a part of my regular routine, and it was like a habit of thought, like you said in one of your videos. Um, it became almost like habit, like wake in the morning, DP, wake up at night, DP. Like it's all I was thinking about. Like we could be out for lunch and it'd be like, hey, this taco is really good, DP. I could be out going bowling,
Yeah.
DP. Like it doesn't matter what it was. That was always somehow in the back of my head.
And I always find it fascinating that I think it's around 75% of people will experience TP and DR at some point in their lives. Because it is that common. It's as you're just saying, Ethan, like but it tends to be a very kind of brief, dreamy feeling. It lasts for a couple of
Yeah,
seconds or a couple of minutes or maybe an hour or two, and then it just
yeah,
fades away naturally. And
oh yeah,
people don't really notice it that much, generally because they're just focused on what they're doing. If they're driving the car, if
yeah,
they're taking the kids to school or whatever. But yeah, but when it turns into that chronic condition of kind of checking in it consistently, worrying about it, catastrophizing about it, and it turns into that feedback loop. Exact same for me as well. I stopped everything else in my life. I um I read everything I could about it. And this is back in 2005, like so there was very
oh
little
yeah,
relatively available about it. But
yeah,
I just became obsessed with it, and I mean I work in film. I love music. I love music festivals. Socializing, everything stopped, and this became my focus. It became my life, but at the time, it feels like that's a good thing to do because it's like, well, I have to figure this out. I need to do what I can now to figure this out. And
yeah,
it's only kind of later you realize that that is not the best thing to do because it's just kind of cementing the importance of this thing in your life that's actually temporary and meant to be not meant to last very long. But look, we always make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. But I would have certainly had that moment as well as Ethan thinking like this is a waste of time. This what I'm doing is not making this better. So there has to be a different way. But before we get to that as well, Ethan, quick question: what would have been the lowest moment in your experience before your
oh,
recovery
um,
started?
so it got to the point around month 4, 5, or 6, maybe around that area. I went on a leave of absence from work, so my whole income stream stopped. I didn't go out to social events, so like I was known to be like a very personal person and outgoing. And when we go to parties or go to family get-togethers, I'm the chatterbox. I talked all the time. I went from doing that to kind of just when I go to parties or get-togethers, I kind of hide in the corner, all afraid. I would sleep in a lot, or not just sleep in, but like not sleep at all. I either wake up really early before anyone else was up. I completely sort of let myself go in a way. Like at the time, I was pretty fit, and then I kind of. Some people say they had, like you said, you had issues eating a lot. Like you weren't eating enough food. So me, I was eating too much food. Like I was using eating as more so a coping mechanism at the time. Um, and then like my relationship at the time with my girlfriend was on edge because she wanted to do stuff and I didn't want to do it. And then she was stressed out because I was basically wallowing in my own self pity and not trying to fix the problem. I was just sulking all the time. And I basically let my family down. I became dependent on people. Um, I didn't want to drive my car anymore because I was afraid that I was going to drive it off the road. Um, like maybe sometimes personal hygiene took a hit, things of that nature. Um, it was definitely that was easily my lowest point. The lowest point was when I left my job because I was known to be a workaholic and I turned into don't work at all. So,
Those kind of personal aspects of the condition or any anxiety-based condition can be very, very tough. And the hygiene thing would have, it's something I hadn't thought about in a while, but I remember like not like really kind of getting out of the habit of like showering, especially
yeah.
when I moved home with my parents as well, because I stopped everything, I stopped working as well. I moved home with my parents and I got it was interesting actually looking back on it because it was like it's like if you're sick with the if you're sick with the flu for like a couple
Yeah.
of days or something, sometimes you might not shower because you're just well,
Yeah.
I'm in bed. I just, I'm drinking liquids. But
Yeah.
I'm not in a proper kind of hygiene routine because I'm sick. And I think I kind of got into that routine. And as you were saying as well, I think kind of like staying in bed and my hygiene routine kind of just like fell apart. And then that, of course, kind of contributes to a lack of motivation on your part. And I do remember getting to a point where I said to myself, like Sean, you have to shower. Like you have to
Yeah.
get up out of bed and shower because that's part of being a human being,
Yeah.
Um,
I got to the point where my hair was getting longer because I wasn't keeping up on anything. It was like my hair was like down to here, and I started getting my stubble coming in and all that. And I was looking like a hobo almost, like just no showering. I was eating food. My room was a mess. It was just like it was. It was as if I became almost like a different person. But yet again, I didn't change at all. It was just the way I was acting that was changing. But that was because again, I was wallowing in my own self pity. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't, like I do, wasn't giving myself a fighting chance at all. I was just giving up essentially.
yeah, yeah. And I think as well, it is that thing of as I mentioned earlier, we make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. And I think that when we think of what sickness is, we think, well, sickness is as I said, when I get sick, I stay in bed for a couple of days and I just kind of watch Netflix and then I recover. And my normal routines kind of stop. And I think it's understandable that when we go through this first, when we the first couple of days and weeks with anxiety or TPD or any anxiety-based conditions, that we kind of fall into that routine because we think, well, I need to, square myself away and until I get better. Whereas in fact, it is in a way kind of cementing this idea that like your life has to stop because of anxiety, and it kind of just and it also gives you more time to focus on it and just it and to start researching it and just kind of like constantly monitoring yourself. So it's a very, very common thing for people to experience, but also it's something that like kind of as part of recovery we start to thankfully leave behind. The thing you mentioned as well about like driving off the road, Ethan, was a major thing with me.
Yeah.
I was terrified of like I was like I can't get into my car because what'll happen is this: I'll start driving the car, and my anxiety will get so bad because it was very bad in the car. My anxiety will get so bad that I'll lose consciousness while driving, and
Yep.
I'll crash into a crowd of people, and I'll drive off a cliff, and I'll die in a fireball. Like,
That that was literally what that's exactly like I would the worst part for me was when like I would get up to an intersection and I'd be sitting there, it's like, what would happen if you go through that intersection? And I'm like, what? Why would and like look
yeah,
and like and the funny thing was again, I was worried about all this stuff happening. Everything I ever catastrophized about in that sort of like in an intrusive thought, like I had intrusive thoughts that one day I would just, like you said, lose my anxiety would just take over, and I would go completely psycho and crazy, and that was terrifying. But again, none of that ever, ever, ever happened. Like I never ever drove my car. Like it's just it was like looking back on it now, I'm like, why did I think that way? Like, like it was because again, we're thinking everything, we're seeing everything through the lens of anxiety. So you don't think logically at all. Of course, at the time I was freaking out. I'm like, oh God, what's gonna happen? Like getting into driving was probably one of the worst things for me at the time. But again, I loved driving. At the time
Yeah.
I just bought my first car at the time. So why would I want to drive? So
Yeah, for sure. And it is interesting that like when you're going through it, you think, oh, this is definitely going to happen, you know.
yeah,
And then
oh
after you recover, when the anxiety starts to reduce and the DPDR starts to fade away, you look back on it and you say, like, what? Like, but why was I worried about that happening? Because there's not a shred of evidence to say that like
yeah,
I'm going to drive into that intersection. Like I'm not
yeah,
like
nothing.
have I ever like you know like hurt somebody like that in the past or done like or like
Yeah,
been
I
violent? Like no, of course not, and I would never do
yeah,
that.
I that's what I would do. I would like think to myself, okay, have you ever done that in the past? Well, no, because you can't. Like I can't even hurt a fly. Like I've literally there's been times I've been maybe upset with someone because of things they've done, and I've never ever thought to myself I want to physically harm them because that's a
Yeah,
terrible way of thinking, right? But like I said, like these are the things that it was just because, like I said, like you said, we're seeing everything through anxiety. We're seeing things, we're catastrophizing, and then one thought leads to another, and one thought, and then it's just a never-ending loop that goes back around until eventually the cycle breaks at one point. But still,
yeah.
yeah.
And at what point, Ethan, did you actually discover the word depersonalization and or derealization? Was it
Um,
online or did somebody say it to you?
so basically, yeah, I searched something on the internet like, oh, I'm not feeling real. What is this? And of course, the first thing that came up was actually psychosis, and that did not make me feel better at all. But then I was like, I can't have psychosis. Like, come on now. So I digged a little deeper, and I ended up finding. I went on YouTube and I found a bunch of things on depersonalization,
Mm,
derealization, and I looked at a bunch of videos, and some of them weren't as appealing to me, I guess you could say. So I actually saw your video, and you had I like the way your videos are portrayed with the animated thing and the green screen and all that stuff like that, it's very well put together in a way where it's understanding. It has pick the little pictograms or pictures you have in it sometimes.
yeah.
You have a suit, like your voice was pretty soothing as well to hear. um and that's basically when I first realized the term depersonalization, derealization was that's really what brought me into that. From when I first saw that, it actually brought me into a state of calmness for the first time in a while. When I it was one of your earlier videos. It was the one it was a depersonalization on weed or something like that. Like
Mm.
it was you did a video on weed or something like that. So and that definitely helped a lot, and that's when I discovered the term. I have heard, I did hear of it in the past, but of course I just shrugged it off because at the time I wasn't dealing with anything like that. I was like, oh, depersonalization, what's that? And I would just walk away because it didn't seem, like I said, it wasn't relevant. So to me at the time, so
And then subsequent to that, Ethan, how did your recovery start, or how did things kind of change for you after that?
so basically, it was probably around month 8 or 9, um, maybe even a year, I'd say, of dealing with it. Of course, every day was kind of different. Some days where maybe I felt it more than other days. It just depended on how it was. So the first thing I did was I changed my diet. Um, I cut out sugars. I don't drink coffee or tea, but I avoided drinking coffee and tea because um, I caffeine means I'm really sensitive to it, so I got to be careful with that. Um, I basically started eating healthier, maybe eating more whole foods, fresh foods, fruits and vegetables. I ate so much oatmeal, you wouldn't even believe it. I have all different recipes with the protein powder with it and all that, the honey and baked oats, this oats, that. Drinking loads of water, tons of water. I would have maybe sometimes I would have sparkling water as well. That was one thing. I also went for a ton of walks. Those two staples were the beginning to my recovery because I was eating healthy, so my body felt better. No, less pain. I was losing a bit of weight as well. Then I started going for walks. But I eased my way into this, so it wasn't like I woke up one morning and I started eating healthy. It was like every day I would cut out a bad food. I would add something to the routine. I developed a routine. I also went back to work because I found that I need money, so I went back to work. I started working again, and it was like I was on afternoon shift, so I would wake up, I would eat my breakfast, or I would go work out or go for a walk, and because I want to make sure I get my sunshine and all that.
Mhm.
And the biggest change for me was when I started eating better. That's when I really started seeing it. And I also listened to a lot of music. Like, if I ever found myself like um, feeling negative or losing hope, I put on like really good music. Like, I don't know, like obviously something, Elton John was really good. I love
Mm.
Elton John.
Yeah.
Some rock songs were good. I try to avoid all the depressing, sad music because, I don't want to, obviously bring myself down. I want to bring myself up. Spending a lot of time outside was helped me too. Like during the summer, I would just sit out back in the backyard, maybe meditate, not even meditate, like just close my eyes, listen to music, relax, bring my body to a calmer state. Like
Mm.
those things were the state, like the staples that accelerated my recovery and started the recovery.
Can you tell me just a bit about how reading the depersonalization
Oh
manual
yeah.
was helpful?
Um, it gave me not only did it educate me on DPDR a lot, it the relaxation program was like so well done. I loved like that was like a bedtime that was like a bedtime story for me almost. Like that was like at the time I would listen to that before I go to bed. The pep talk was good. If I really felt down one day, I throw on the pep talk and you'd be talking about it and all that. And that would help tremendously. Um, there's a couple other little audio files in there about like there was one that had to do with like food, eating healthy. There was one about like, it was you were just kind of dissecting the everything down to like make it in a logical level. And you had some videos I watched, and like the DP manual was the one thing that again, that was right when I got the book, again, accelerated my recovery because everything in it helped me tremendously. The especially the relaxation program, that was and the pep talk, those two staples, those helped me a lot, a lot.
That's great. That's great to hear. I'm delighted. And so, how was this when you, what was it like when you started to feel the effects of the recovery happen? Was it kind of,
Oh,
was it kind of certain symptoms started to reduce, or was it just things starting to get back to
I didn't
normal?
get
How was it?
I became more instead of being like getting irritated by people or, getting being, my room was cleaner. Like I cleaned up my room, I cleaned up my act. I was losing weight. I good weight, mind you. Um, I didn't get that like the pane of glass that was shifted right between. It was almost as if it was slid out, like
Right.
it was gone. Um, I found myself instead of being up at night watching DP videos, DPR videos, or dwelling about like dwelling about it and obsessing over it, I would go play a video game with my friends. I would go to the park. I started doing things and I started doing everything I could to keep my mind off of it. The only thing I actually ended up ever going to, I never ever looked at another DP video aside from your videos because I felt that yours were positive encouragement and they were useful to me when I needed them because I want to make sure all of my information is really good and yours was amazing, absolutely amazing. Um, like I said, I my symptom as time went on, you know, my symptoms would reduce. Um, my I started thinking logically again. Um, yeah, I had moments here and there where I had, maybe little relapses, but like they were like very minimal, very minimal. That would just be like, oh, this is DP. It's all good. Just go drink some water, get back in the game. It just, over time, I just with doing all these things to let my doing all these things just helped tremendously. I was giving myself a fighting chance. I could have laid in bed all day and kept my little thing I was doing, but that's not who I am. You gotta fight. Really gotta help yourself, you know?
For me as well, there was, I mean, I remember when I was coming out of anxiety and DPDR, I was, I kind of became less um, obsessed with the thoughts and feelings over time, and then I started to care about them kind of less and less. And I just
Yeah,
said, well, I'm going to the gym anyways. Like I'm going to meet my friends to go to the cinema anyways. Even if this is there, even if I'm feeling some anxiety and DP, this is happening anyway. So this is not part of my decision. I'm going to do this thing anyways. And once I just kind of kept that, and then I found after a while, I just started to have longer periods of time where I would forget about it. Um, it's such a common question that I hear people ask it, but what's it actually like to recover from it? And that was an aspect of it for me, was that like I kind of got to a point where I had entire days where I would just forget about it completely. And if I
yeah,
thought about it for a
that's
second, I go, oh, there it is. But then I go back to being okay.
yeah. That's literally like I remember like it was one whole week. It was an entire week. I had not only was my week filled up with activities, I was making sure I was getting quality sleep, I was working out. I went a whole week. And at the end of the week, I think I just thought about it. I was like, holy cow. I went the entire week without thinking about this, and it felt so relieving. It was the best fit. Like it's almost like you ever like see like a window that's all fogged up, and then you like take a washcloth and you wipe it over and it's all clear again. That is how I felt. It's just you gotta like the biggest thing I would tell people who suffer from DPDR is just you gotta give yourself a fighting chance. You gotta don't lose hope because everything does get better. I promise you that. Like if you know where from where I was to where I am now, things are just way better, way better.
Good. That's great to hear. So now that you're out of it, Ethan, I presume day-to-day life is back to normal.
Yeah.
You're working, um, socializing, all the rest of it. But so when you think back on the whole experience, and think back on those thoughts of like, I can't get out of bed, or I'm afraid the driving thing, for example, being afraid of getting in the car. So what's it like for you now, kind of looking back on the experience from the perspective of recovery?
When I'm looking back at it, I thought I was kind of silly. I kind of laugh sometimes, like, why I didn't want to get in the car? Come on now. I like not going to work, laying in bed all day and just all that stuff. Like thinking about it, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, I was such a fool. Like, why didn't I get like I could have like it's but like I said, at the time, my mindset was completely different. Um, it's just looking back on everything, it's just like, what was I like? I think I'm kind of quote you here, but like, what was I ever worried about? Honestly, what was I ever worried about? Like, I look back on it, I'm just like, it's nothing. There's nothing because at the time I'm thinking I had psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. I did not have any of those, and now looking back on it, I thought to myself, man, like, it was very silly, and I'm very happy that I actually one day said to myself, I want to fight and fix this, and I did, and it's very very. I honestly I came out better as a person, stronger mentally, and now knowing that I can do that, it makes my mindset towards other things are different now too, like working out, maybe doing a project, being at work, my boss gives me a job to do. It's a little more, it's like I know I can do things now. It really, really, it was a confidence boost, if anything.
It's such an interesting thing, and such a common thing of like looking back on the experience after recovery and just being like, I don't know what I was afraid of. I don't know what I was so scared about. Um, but it is, like I can remember things like I can remember like not being able to walk to the bathroom because I was terrified of like looking in the mirror. I remember being afraid of like looking up at the sky because it felt like it was too big, and
Yeah,
all these different things.
yeah,
But I can't.
yeah. I
It, Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, I remember like for me, it was like going outside and looking up at the sky and the vastness of space. And I was thinking about black holes and, the how endless space could be. And at the time, I was terrified. I'm like freaking out. Now it's like I find it kind of cool, you know.
Yeah.
I believe in the multiverse theory, so I will, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's there was a list of like especially sci-fi and horror stuff. And
oh
I love science fiction. I love horror. Um, and there was a list of things that I films and books that I couldn't even be around them. Like if I saw like the DVD of um the Truman Show or something, or Inception or something like that. Well, Inception wasn't out when I had it, but like that type of film, I would have
yeah,
just the poster would just set me off, like, and I'd start
yeah.
freaking out about thinking about philosophy and existentialism and are things real,
Yeah,
like, and
it
and
was.
sorry to interrupt you, and I honestly would
Yeah,
say to myself, like, I don't think I could ever watch a film like that again because it would just set me off, like, and sure now I love it, like, I love science fiction.
yeah. I
Yeah.
know it was crazy. Like I would watch like a Marvel movie, and I'd be like, "Oh, I can't. Like this is weird. Why are these people? What's their consciousness like? What's?" I would ask myself stupid questions. It was all these dumb questions I would ask myself.
Mm.
Horror movies. I would. I like you said. Even before I had DPDR, horror movies were one of those things that I was iffy on because I think I saw it, that movie. I saw uh Get Out, the Jordan Peele movie Get Out, and I
Mm.
saw
Mm.
Us, Get Out, that doppelganger movie.
Yep.
And before, like that's just after I had DP, I was totally fine. I did not have an issue watching them. But while I had DP, oh my God, I would they would freak me out. Like again, watching a trailer would creep me out. Like I'd be like, I could even hear it. Like if I heard it, I'd be like,
Yeah.
ah, I would flee the
Yeah.
area.
Yeah. 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 It is. It is.
Yeah,
And it is mad once you kind of come through it, then you look back on it and you say, because once you're out of it, you realize that like you weren't actually afraid of the content of the
yeah,
film. Like what that wasn't what it was. It was it was because your thoughts are racing. It was difficult to concentrate. You're in the middle of a fight or flight response,
yeah,
so obviously you're kind of more attuned to kind of things being frightening, like, but it's not specifically the content, or there aren't like specific kind of like concepts in science fiction that are always going to set you off. Like it's because your body and brain are on high alert, your thoughts are racing and they're catastrophizing, and you've got this feeling of disconnection, which feels frightening, but is part of your body and brain's correct and natural response to stress and anxiety. It's just happening at the wrong time. But once you get past it, you look back at those films and you go, "Oh, I actually love those films. Why was I why was
yeah,
I scared? I love Jordan Peele
yeah,
movies. Why was I scared of that?" Like,
yeah. I love Jordan Peele.
Yeah.
Marvel movies were good. It's just it's crazy how I really look back on myself and I think like if I could travel back in time and go see my old self the way I was and all that, I would I could literally be like his help. I could be my past self's helper. I can pick him up off his feet. I can give him everything he needs to know to get better. And it would be kind of funny to see the way I acted back then. Just like the stuff I was afraid of. I was like, couldn't go outside. Come on now. I couldn't get in my car. Come on now. Like you really think back and it was crazy. But
Yeah.
like everything got better. It took some time. It took some tinkering. It took some altering the routine. I had relapses, but you know what? I feel like at the end of the day, I came out a better person, a stronger person, and my confidence was way higher now. Like I really do feel like, there's more I can achieve and accomplish now. So
That is great. So what's your day-to-day life like at the moment, Ethan? Just completely back to normal?
yeah, so basically right now, I wake up, do a little exercising, sometimes go for a walk, eat my breakfast. I can go now I go out to on weekends. I like to go out to concerts. I like to go to bars. I go to clubs. Of course, I don't really drink alcohol that much, so I do limit myself with that. Moderation. Um,
Mm.
Spending time with family. I go to family birthday parties now. I work out. I work. I go to my job, and I do really good. I don't fight or flight. I have a good time. I giggle. I laugh. I'm very outgoing now. I have no problem driving anywhere. I have no problem being anywhere. I've essentially, like I said, essentially, I'm 100% recovered from DPDR and honestly anxiety itself. Um, just by, your book, I would definitely say that your book was like, I was following all these staples, like the exercise and all, but when I got your book, it literally boosted it like 50%. Like it was like a huge help. And yeah, I mean, right now things are really good, going well. So
That is great. That is so great to hear.
mhm,
Uh, Ethan, thank you so much for being with us today and for
mhm,
sharing your story. I know it'll be inspirational for any DPDR sufferers out there.
mhm.
And I'm delighted the book was so useful. I'm delighted that you're fully recovered and back to living your best life. So
Thank you.
yeah. So it was lovely having you on the channel, and
Mhm.
lovely to meet you, Ethan. And if you're ever over in Ireland, give me a shout. We'll go for a pint, okay? One
Oh
though,
yeah, of
one
course.
pint.
Yeah, yeah. One time. Thank
Yeah,
you for having me.
we'll watch the rugby. Come over for the Rugby World Cup, you know.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, great to meet you, Ethan. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you.